G'day everyone. Welcome to the Spud Fit podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Taylor, and today's podcast is brought to you by me. I don't have any advertisers on here other than me. So the DIY Spud Fit Challenge is my book, subtitle A How-To Guide to Doing Your Own Spud Fit Challenge. It's a little book that me and my wife wrote. My beautiful, amazing wife, Mandy Van Zanen. It's all about the hows and whys and whats and wheres of doing your own Spud Fit Challenge, your own potato-only diet challenge. I ate only potatoes for all of last year, all of 2016, nothing but potatoes, and a lot of people asked me for advice, so I put together this short book to help people do it if that's what they choose to do. You can find that at my website, www.spudfit.com. And you can find lots of other information there too, like information about this podcast and blog posts and everything else that I'm working on. If you like what I'm doing with this podcast or anything else I'm doing, then the best thing you can do for me is to share it with your friends. Like, subscribe, go to iTunes, leave a review, preferably 5 stars. It's that helps. Anyway, today we are talking to Dustin Rudolph. Dustin's another guy that I met at the McDougall Advanced Study weekend last month, and I had the pleasure of hanging out with him for a couple of days, and we went out for dinner and had lots of good chats, and including this one that you're about to listen to. So I'm a big fan of Dustin, and I'm really happy to be able to share him and his story with you guys on the podcast today. He has a book that you can also get called The Empty Medicine Cabinet. I'll put a link to that in the show notes on my website. It's The Pharmacist Guide to the Hidden Danger of Drugs and the Healing Powers of Food. And that's really a good introduction to what today's conversation is about. Dustin is the plant-based pharmacist. He is a qualified and has practiced pharmacy for a long time. And he changed his ways. He went from believing that drugs were the be-all and end-all, basically, that if you got any problem, then it's best treated and fixed with drugs. And now he's changed his ways, and he now advocates for a whole food plant-based diet most of the time. He thinks that drugs should basically be a last resort, and I like that attitude. It's another person that I've talked to with a really refreshing attitude in that they are actively campaigning against the things that they make money from. And he's one of them. He's someone who is a pharmacist who's hoping to put pharmacists out of business. So it's really refreshing to talk to these kind of people. And I had a great conversation. Dustin's a genuine, lovely guy, beautiful person, and really full of a lot of helpful advice and some really interesting insights as well into the pharmaceutical industry and the science that goes into producing positive news for different drugs. So this is a really eye-opening conversation for me, and I hope you enjoy it too. Oh, and before I go, Mandy Van Zanen, my wife, made the Spud Fit jingle you're about to listen to. So thanks to Mandy Van Zanen. Go to mandyvanzanen.com if you're interested in finding out more about Andy. All right, hope you enjoy this. Spud up. All right, we're here with Dustin Rudolph, another of my series of podcasts from the McDougall Advanced Study weekend. I actually had the pleasure and privilege of going out for dinner with Dustin last night too, so this has been cool. Anyway, Dustin, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Potato, Mr. Spud Fit.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. Can we start with the obvious question, who is Dustin Rudolph?
Well, Dustin Rudolph, I'm the plant-based pharmacist. I'm known as a plant-based pharmacist. I am actually a real pharmacist, a licensed pharmacist. I'm licensed in 4 states in the United States.
4 states, wow.
in Missouri, Florida, Texas, and Arizona, so I can
Okay.
practice in any of those states. I currently reside in the Tampa Bay, Florida region, and I've been there since 2004, and I have worked in both retail pharmacy and in hospital pharmacy. And I'm currently in hospital pharmacy. I've been working in hospital pharmacy for about 10 and a half or 11 years.
Oh, right. That long.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I didn't realize
A
it was
long
that
time.
long.
I've
Yeah.
been out of school since 2002, so
Yeah.
I've got a good 15 years under my belt.
Yeah.
And just trucking along right here.
Yeah. All right. It's I really enjoyed your speech, which is obviously why I wanted to sit down and have this chat with you. But before we get to the finer details of your talk, why did you become a pharmacist?
You know, so it's kind of funny, Andrew. I was in 4th grade, and I told people I wanted to become a pharmacist. And you know, when people ask,
It's not your typical dream that a 4th grader
no,
has.
not at all. It was funny because, you know, the little tiny squirts in 4th grade, you ask them, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you know, most 4th graders, if they're a boy, they're gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna play baseball, or
Yeah.
I'm gonna play football.
I was going to play football when I was 4.
You were?
In 4th grade, so
You
yeah.
did, like
I was,
professional.
I was definitely going to be a professional footballer.
Yeah, I mean that for some reason that just wasn't on my radar. I didn't want to be a race car driver or astronaut or you know, any of that. It's just, you know, I told people I was going to be a pharmacist.
Yeah, right.
Actually, I didn't tell them I was going to be a pharmacist. So what I did is I told them, well, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be like Todd, because I'm
Yeah.
from a very small town in Montana.
Yeah.
It's called Baker, Montana.
Just a little bit closer to the mic.
It's
Yeah.
like
You can lift it up a bit if you want. That might be easier. Yeah.
Baker, Montana is actually like 9 miles from the border of North Dakota. So it's a very small town. There's only like, I don't know, 1,800 people there when I was growing up. We had one stoplight, and it was just a red blinking stoplight. It didn't even have a yellow or a green
Wow.
on it. So no chain stores, no McDonald's, no none of that.
Yeah.
No Walmart. So we had one physician in the whole town,
Yeah.
and he was obviously our family physician. And then we had 2 pharmacies owned by 2 separate pharmacists in the whole town.
Yeah.
And Todd was my family's pharmacist.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just always looked up to Todd, and I said,
Yeah.
you know, I'm going to be like Todd. He's
All
friendly
right.
and nice, and that's what I said.
Todd sounds like a good bloke.
He is. I mean, to this day, like if I go back to
Yeah.
Montana, he's always asking me, hey, you want to buy a pharmacy? Because he's getting close to retirement, you know. So
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, that's okay.
Yeah. You could turn it into a grocery store.
Yeah, I could turn it into a farm, FARM
Yeah.
assist.
Oh, cool. So it's nice that you got someone so influential in your life that made you want to be like them. I love that story. So when you first became a pharmacist, did you have a goal in why you wanted to do that, what you were hoping to achieve out of that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I wanted to be a pharmacist because I wanted to help people, and I wanted to help sick people get healthy. And so that was really my whole goal.
Seen Todd doing that growing up. Todd was helping people in town to get healthy, and you wanted to do that too. That's cool. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So there's going to be some sort of difference between what you wanted to achieve and what you actually did achieve as a pharmacist. So
Right.
How did that go down for you?
So I actually knew nothing about health until like 8 years into my career.
Yeah.
I know that sounds just crazy, but I went all the way through college and pharmacy school, and you know, I spent $60,000 going through college, which is a bargain at these days.
Yeah.
But went through pharmacy school. I learned a lot about disease. I learned a lot about sickness. I learned a lot about medications, but I really learned absolutely nothing about health.
Yeah.
Which seems kind of counterintuitive if you're going to some
Absolutely.
kind of a medical education system. So
I've heard all these sort of stories from doctors before, but I've never really thought about pharmacy as what a pharmacist might study. So it's interesting. Yeah.
We to give you some details. It's very rigorous, the pharmacy program. They actually put us through all the different modalities like cardiovascular and cancer and oncology and immunology and all these different specialties with the body and these different sciences and these different classes and disease states and stuff. So we actually have separate classes for all of them.
Yeah.
And we learn how the doctor diagnoses diagnoses their patient,
Yeah.
the abbreviated version. Obviously,
Yeah.
we don't get the long version like the physicians do.
Yeah.
And then we get a very longer version of how to manage. I say manage because it's how to treat them, but it's really how to manage them, because you're just managing their chronic disease. You're not really making them go from heart disease to no heart disease. You're just making them go from heart disease to taking a bunch of pills and managing their heart disease.
Yeah, trying to stop them getting sicker rather than make them better.
Yeah,
I guess.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's basically you're trying to help them avoid death, I guess.
Yeah,
And then I got out of school.
Prolong the misery.
Prolong the misery, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've always said that the longer a patient's prescription list and medication list, the more miserable and sick they are. And I've never seen anything other than that in my career. So I got out of pharmacy school, and I went in and practiced retail pharmacy. So I was the pharmacist behind the counter, passing out the pills.
Like Todd.
Like Todd.
Yeah.
Like Todd. So
Awesome.
had fulfilled my dream.
Yeah.
And I was proud of, like, when somebody would come to me and say, "Oh, I've got this wrong with me," or "I've got this wrong," or I can't poop, or I've got this rash on me, and what can you do? And I've always been very proud to say, "Well, I have a pill for that." Or I have a cream for that, or whatever. And I was so proud of that.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was just a Band-Aid on the problem.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like 8 years into my career that this is kind of a funny story, but I went to my podiatrist.
Yeah.
Because I had, I was on my feet for so many years, and I had a little bit of nerve pain that was developing in my foot. And I went to my podiatrist for him to help me with my foot. And it was in 2009. Actually, it was exactly 8 years ago this month, February of 2009.
Yeah.
I showed up in his office, and that was the time in the USA where we had the healthcare debate, like the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act had not passed yet. It was still being debated and argued and stuff. So there was this Time magazine article in the waiting room, and it had a big segment in it that was on the healthcare debate, the pros and cons of both sides. So I was reading it, and I wasn't done when they called me back into the exam room, so I took it with me, and I would continue to read it in the exam room. And Dr. Salvatore DeLellis, he's my podiatrist. He's a good friend now.
Yeah, okay.
Everybody calls him Dr. Sal. Dr. Sal walked into the room, and he's like, "What you reading there, Dustin?" And so I said, "Oh, it's just this Time magazine article on the healthcare debate, the pros and cons of both sides." So both of us being medical guys and in the healthcare profession, we started talking about it and chit-chatting about it. And nice little discussion. About 2, 3, 5 minutes into our conversation, he stopped and he's like, "Well, Dustin, it doesn't matter what they legislate in Congress. It's not going to fix the healthcare crisis."
Yeah.
And I'm just got the most puzzled look on my face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, that's the whole point of this. To fix the problems that we have in our healthcare system." And he goes, "No, it doesn't matter what law they pass or who's going to pay for what. We're not going to fix the healthcare crisis unless we have a nation full of healthy people."
Yeah.
And right then,
That's a really interesting insight. Yeah.
the light bulb went off. And it's like, wow, this is a different way to look at this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, what exactly do you mean by that?" And he goes, "Well, hold on for a second. I'm going to go to my office. I'll be right back." So he leaves the exam room. He goes to his office. He comes back about a minute later, and he comes in. He has a piece of paper in his hand, and he hands me that piece of paper, and he goes, "This is my reading list. I give it to my patients, all my patients." And he goes, "You should read the books, get the books on this list and read them." And so I responded to him. I was like, "Okay, now I'm a slow reader."
Yeah.
So it takes me a while because I like to take everything in.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to read things over twice.
I was about to say, that's what I do.
So,
I read through things and go, "What was that? I don't get it." I'll go back and read again. And
yeah, because you kind of like daydream, and
Yeah,
then it's like, okay, I got to read this. Like, it goes into my brain, you know?
Yeah.
So I told him, if I were to pick one of these 4 books to read, which one should I pick? And he goes, "Pick the China Study by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. That should be a mandatory reading for all medical students before they're allowed to graduate medical school."
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, if he's saying that, that must be one important book.
Yeah.
You know, so then I from then on, I went home and I picked up a copy of the China Study at the Barnes and Noble and read it, and I was hooked.
Yeah.
I was hooked.
It's a pretty amazing book. I remember that the first time I saw that book, I didn't read it. I thought, I'm not interested in science. I'll just leave that alone. Well, I was interested in science, but I wasn't interested in the science of nutrition at all, and so I left it alone. And
that's interesting, because weren't you a personal trainer too?
I had the qualification, but I never did it.
Okay.
I've got a degree in sports science.
Because most people that kind of go down that route are usually very interested in not only the exercise part, but the nutrition part.
Yeah. Well, I was very interested in the exercise part, but didn't really care about the nutrition part. I just thought, just eat, whatever. Who cares? Just eat. As long as you go, it's just fuel, and it doesn't really matter what kind of fuel you put in. Just put the fuel in, and then you can go and train. But so I saw that book years and years ago, and someone recommended it to me. I was like, nah, boring. I don't want to read about nutrition science. And then I didn't end up reading it until I was researching to do my potato thing. And my mind was blown.
What'd you think about it?
It was amazing. Yeah, it was just an incredible story, if nothing else, just of this guy that grew up on a dairy farm and tried to do research on how he could help get animal protein to poor people, and how he just totally turned around his ideas from what he started off thinking to what he thought at the end. And it was a really impressive book.
I was so impressed, because it's so evidence-based, and like in medicine, as a pharmacist and a doctor and a nurse, and like all of us medical professionals, we're taught we're taught with evidence-based medicine. Like they drill that into our head in school. So that was all evidence-based, and I was hooked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've since read his other books too, which Whole's very good.
Whole's very good. Yep.
Yeah, great book. Well, so that kick-started you then. That book kick-started the change for you.
Absolutely. That started me. And then one of the second books on Dr. Sal's list was Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn in Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease.
Yeah, I read that one too.
And so then I read that one after that. And I can't remember what the other two books were, but I definitely picked up those. And then, and then I went on to McDougall and Dr. Furman. And
you've probably read the rest of the list now.
Yeah, Dr. Barnard and like all those, all the thought leaders, all of our plant-based heroes you and I look up to. Yeah. Read all their books, and then I started looking up the studies. Like I'd look in their notes section on the back of the book and look at the actual studies and look them up in PubMed, and then I just went to town. Yeah, similar sort of reading journey to what I did, I guess. I read the mine started with a YouTube video, but then I went and found all the studies that were in the YouTube video, and then I went and found all the books and stuff as well. And it was a mind-blowing experience. Because obviously, if you're going to eat potatoes and that's it for a whole year, you want to make sure that something bad's not going to happen to your body, right? Exactly, yeah. But mine was, it was probably only 6 weeks that I was doing my research for, I guess. But, it was hours every day. Yeah, it was a big deal, yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. Anyway, enough about me. This is all about you. So that was your, I guess, that experience with Dr. Sal. Was Sal? Dr. Sal. With Dr. Sal was the beginning of your journey to becoming plant-based a plant-based eater yourself. Absolutely, yeah. I tell people all the time that, I went into my podiatrist to get my foot fixed, and he ended up saving my life. Yeah, that's amazing. What was the transition like for you then? So that was in February of 2009, and as soon as I read the China study, I was like, okay, I don't want to eat meat, like red meat and chicken and turkey anymore. I'm gonna get rid of that. But I kept eating fish for a while, because I thought that fish was a healthy food. Of course, many people think that, and it's been proven that it's not the best source of protein and omega-3s. But then I also, I slowly transitioned. I got rid of my cow's milk, and I tried the rice milk and almond milk and soy milk and all those kind of milks. And I, settled on almond milk. I like unsweetened, original almond milk. Yeah. And then I, got rid of eating. I used to eat yogurt all the time, and I kind of switched over to like a soy-based yogurt, and I tried, I think, brown rice yogurt and that kind of stuff.
I've never heard of brown rice yogurt.
Yeah,
okay.
And I think they make yogurt out of almond milk as well.
Oh, really?
So it's all different varieties.
I'm not a yogurt guy, but I knew there was soy yogurt, and I've heard of coconut yogurt too.
Coconut, out of coconut milk, and so I tried all those, and now I don't eat yogurt at all. But when you have something that you eat for years and years and years, and then you're like, okay, that's probably not the healthiest thing to eat. What do I do now? It's nice to have some kind of replacement to kind of get you over the hump.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I did, and then it was probably mid-year in 2009. I'm not sure exactly when, but I ended up giving up fish because I started reading more about that and the high fat content in fish, and that it's not the best for you. And then it was January of 2010, and I had friends from Minnesota, my old college buddies, my old college friends that were down in Florida. Of course, it's winter in Minnesota. It's freezing up there. So they're visiting Florida. They were down about 3-4 hours south of me in Naples, Florida, at a condo. And they said, hey, come and visit us, And they knew that I had switched how I ate. And so I went down there. And in January, it's NFL football season. And football's huge in America.
Yeah.
So it's playoff time. And it's Sunday NFL playoff time. And they're like, Dustin, do you still eat pizza? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I still eat pizza, but it has to be just cheese pizza. I won't eat any meat on my pizza. Yeah. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to order pizza. Is that okay? I was like, sure. So it was a Domino's cheese pizza. Yeah. Was the last animal product I have. And after that, I didn't. I gave up cheese, and that was it. No more animal products.
Was there some sort of event that happened eating that pizza that made you think, I'm not going to do this anymore? Or was
Not really. I just... at that point, I was about a year into it, and I was just like, I've read enough, I've looked at enough, and I know that, meat, dairy, and eggs are not healthy for you. Yeah. And it's all evidence-based in the scientific literature, and it's just time. It's just time to make that transition.
Fair enough. And you can still have pizza anyway. You just don't put cheese on it.
Yeah, vegetable pizza.
Yeah, vegetable pizza. They're great. I've had a couple of them this year.
Yeah, I have too. It's one of my treats that I have.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good treat if you're just having a wholemeal pizza base with veggies on top. Then
exactly, just some tomato sauce and just pile on the veggies.
Yeah. So this change that you went through, going from eating a standard sort of diet to a whole food plant-based diet, is it's changed. Obviously, it's a big change in the way you eat. But it also, for a lot of people, causes a big change in the way you think and the way that you see the world. So I'm guessing you went through that sort of
Oh my goodness. Too. Yes. Yeah. Completely changed how I viewed and perceived the world. Because I was like many people in Western cultures. It's like you see what's advertised and thrown at you on the TV and the radio and the magazines and stuff, and you're kind of have your blinders on because of all that. And it's not just with food, it's like with everything. So at that point, I was like, it completely made me think differently to always question. I think that's what I got from it. Like, I always need to question everything that I see. I don't know if
that's
a
pretty
common
thing
for you.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit weirder for me though. I was always... there were areas in life that I always questioned and that I always thought critical about, but food wasn't one of them. And there were other things too. But this change in the way I ate just basically made me, instead of just questioning politically, I guess is what I'm talking about, I would always question motivations of politicians and the influence of big business on politics and things like that. That was an area that I was very skeptical on and very much into questioning the motivations behind all the political decisions that happen. But this change in the way I ate and everything, it just sort of made me question all areas of life instead of just these narrow focus of a few things that I was a skeptic on. Yeah,
absolutely. So, and that's a good point. Like I had known that politics was, could be kind of shady, but, I didn't really give it too much thought or look into it. And then, I'm sure, as you start looking at who's supporting the politicians and why our systems are the way they are. And you're just like blown away once you start digging.
Yeah. And you have this realization that all this, everything I thought I knew about food and what we should eat and what's a healthy diet has just been totally blown out the water. What else have I been misled on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that obviously then had an effect on your practice as a pharmacist. So how did that happen? How did that go?
Well, at this point, like it was about 4.5 or 5 years into my career. So at that point, I had no idea about health and nutrition. I had switched from retail to hospital, so I was already in the hospital sector of the industry, working as a hospital pharmacist, and it's a completely different world. So you're dealing with, you're more directly dealing with physicians and nurses instead of patients in the hospital setting. And you're dealing with the acute crisis as somebody comes in the emergency room with a heart attack or stroking or, with a life-threatening pneumonia or from a car accident or whatever. You're dealing with that. So I was feeling a little bit better about my career because I actually felt like I'm saving somebody from imminent death at that moment in their life. But when I found out about this nutrition stuff, it really put in perspective like what my whole career as a pharmacist was, and I'm just a big Band-Aid to a problem still. Even working in a hospital, I can do a little bit of good, but I'm a big Band-Aid to my patients. So it's not really, pharmacy is not really in an environment where you can practice plant-based nutrition with patients and stuff. Yeah. I mean, I do share it with my colleagues, the ones that I work closely with every day. Yeah. They know all about this because I never stop talking about it. They probably get tired of me talking about it. But I've actually got, I know one colleague in particular, another pharmacist, that completely switched over to being plant-based because, she saw the evidence too. Yeah,
all right. Well, that's cool. So you probably me as well are who that joke about how do you know if someone's vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
What is it? No, I haven't heard that.
No, that's it. How do you know if someone's vegan? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
Oh, yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Okay, that's absolutely true. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, when you find something so exciting and so life-changing and so good for you, of course you want to tell people about it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you want to help them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, and you want to help improve the planet and improve the other thing. Yeah. So anyway, it's human nature. So why is it do you have? I'm guessing you do have thoughts on why it is that so many people take so many drugs. And by drugs this time, I'm talking about pharmaceutical prescription drugs for whatever array of illnesses people have.
Well, in the Western world, we're brainwashed. And that's what it comes down to. Like, there's so much advertising and marketing going on, not only to the public, but to healthcare professionals. Yeah. And it completely distorts the truth of the matter and what we actually need to do to get people healthy and what we are doing to, quote, get people healthy. Yeah. And the big industry of big pharma and big agriculture, the meat and the dairy and the big pharmaceutical companies, they have so much money and they use it very wisely.
Yeah, we're probably talking about $1 trillion industries. I'm guessing we're combining all the big pharma companies and.
We spend nearly $4 trillion in the U.S. every single year on healthcare.
Wow, It's
insane.
I would have thought it was a big number if you said 1 trillion. That's why I said probably $1 trillion industries before I started. I had no idea it was that big.
And that's not just the drug companies. I mean, that's healthcare overall. Yeah. But that's insane. I mean, and it's just skyrocketing. It just continues to go up. And like, if we're going to keep spending more and more and more money, why are people continuing to be sick and miserable? Yeah. And because we're not getting any healthier. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. Like, would you take your car to the mechanic and continue to spend more and more money and your car get worse? And not sit there and think like, why am I taking my car to this mechanic who's not fixing it and I'm spending all this money?
Yeah.
But we don't think that way.
Yeah.
You know, and it's disturbing actually.
It is. Yeah. That's that mechanic analogy is a really good one. Yeah. It's crazy how much time and effort and money we put into trying to just prolong the misery. Like
yeah,
I
and the
said
typical
before.
patient will go to their doctor and they'll have a medical problem, maybe heart disease or high cholesterol, blood pressure, high blood sugar, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they have all the faith in the world in their doctor, and doctors are looked at as kind of godlike figures, that they went to all this schooling and training and good meaning on their part to really help people.
Yeah, of course none of these people get into it to try to do the wrong thing. Like people become doctors and nurses and pharmacists and scientists and all of these related professions because they want to, one, they enjoy it, but also two, they want to try to help people to make a difference. No one sets out to try to do things that cause harm. I'm sure of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I talked about earlier, like the whole reason I got into healthcare and wanted to be a pharmacist because I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
And so, you have these patients who come with all these medical problems to their doctor and their pharmacist and whatnot. And the only thing that they're offered is pills, procedures, and surgeries.
Yeah.
And it's like not even questioned by the patient because we're brainwashed and we don't think to even ask different questions.
Yeah.
And it's all the doctor and the pharmacist know because that's what we've been taught in school.
Yeah. It just reminded me of an experience I had a few years ago now, which I haven't thought about for a long time. But I went to see a doctor when I was living in Holland, actually. I had an earache. And I went to see the doctor, said, hey, I've got this earache. And she looked in my ear. She got these tweezers and pulled out this big clump of stuff. It was pretty gross. But maybe it was like earwax or something that had built up on the inside of my ear. So when you clean your ear, you don't get the stuff that's right on the inside.
I'm sure it's not something you wanted to save and put on the bedroom counter there.
No, but it was pretty gross, and it was way bigger than I thought something could be to fit in your ear. But anyway, there's a point to this story that that fixed it. My earache was gone, and I just remember when I was leaving, I thanked her because I felt great. And she thanked me because she's like, as a doctor, I don't normally get to see myself fixing people.
Yeah, that's weird, huh?
Yeah, people come in and I give them pills and then they come back later and they're still sick. And I've actually fixed someone today. So this is, yeah, so
I can tell you, like, from a healthcare practitioner standpoint, like the most fulfilling thing in the world is not to get your paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's to see somebody else's life change in a positive manner and them going from sick to healthy and getting their life back.
Yeah.
That's the best feeling ever.
Yeah.
And it rarely ever happens in conventional medicine.
Yeah. And
I mean, not to say it doesn't. We have accidents and we have, the crisis at hand because people don't eat right and they get the heart attack. But, so we are able to help people to a small extent. But for the most part, we don't get that on a daily basis. And it's not a fun experience for the physician or the pharmacist or the nurse or any other health care practitioner either.
Yeah. And I can relate to that feeling of helping people now because I've had quite a few people tell me that they've been helped by eating only potatoes and following my example, so I can definitely relate to that.
It's like the best feeling, isn't it?
Oh, it's just an amazing feeling. Yeah, absolutely. But you touched on drug advertising before, and this is something that's been mind-blowing these last few days that I've been in the US. Is I don't watch much TV, but I don't actually own a TV at home.
Oh wow!
So having a TV in my hotel room, it's sort of a novelty. I'll turn the TV on and see what's going on. And seeing the drug advertising has been a mind-blowing and scary experience for me because in Australia, prescription drugs are not allowed to be advertised in any form. Well, they're probably allowed to be advertised in doctors' magazines and things like that, I guess. But the general public never sees advertising of prescription drugs. So to turn on the TV and see these big long ads for prescription drugs where they're trying to actively sell it to people. So you go to your doctor and ask for this prescription is quite scary. And especially to see the like I saw an ad, I can't remember what it was for, but like the whole second half of the ad was the guy reading a list of the possible side effects. And like obviously people are buying it because they're advertising it, and they wouldn't have the money to advertise if people weren't buying it. And it just blows my mind that someone can sit there and listen to this massive list that takes up half of the commercial break of things that might go wrong with you.
Yeah.
And they still go and buy it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of this drug advertising thing? Like it's totally insane to me.
Well, first of all, Andrew, I'm totally jealous because I wish I lived in a country that didn't allow direct-to-consumer advertising on prescription drugs, because it's just a bunch of nonsense what's going on. I mean,
they do advertise, like if you've got like a sniffle or something, they advertise like these nasal sprays and
something over the counter.
These things that can help you with a sore throat and those sorts of things. And like, mild pain relievers like Panadol and things. They do advertise those things. But the attitude is that if you're going to take prescription drugs, you should be taking them because your doctor said it was a good idea, not because you saw it on TV and have gone to ask for it. Right.
I mean, what's sad is we're advertising prescription drugs in the U.S. and I think in New Zealand they can do this too. But like you said, like in Australia and a lot of other countries, even in the Western world, it's illegal to advertise prescription drugs to the direct public. But we're basically taking and advertising these prescription powerful medications to patients and the lay public like they're sneakers or cars or like doodads or something to buy for the home. And it's like you're dealing with people's lives here, and just to advertise that they can go to their doctor and ask for how many umpteen million different meds that they need for every little thing that's wrong with them. That's the other thing. They go, do you feel tired? Are you overweight? Like, of course, like most people feel like that on a daily basis. So they get people thinking like, I have something, some kind of major problem, medical problem with myself. So now I have to go to the doctor and ask for this medication to fix my problem. But then, like you said, there's side effects. And you notice how they like talk about the side effects and they say it really fast, right? At the end, like in kind of lower voice. And then they rattle it off like it's an auction or something. But they have this, they start out the drug commercial with like soothing music or fun music, and they like say, this pill can reduce your risk of heart attacks or whatever by 30 or 40 or 50%, and they make it all sound glamorous. And then in really fast language they say, or it can cause like bleeding and death and kidney failure and all this stuff. And they have to say those things because those things actually happen to people in trials.
I like what I read, what T. Colin Campbell said about the side effects. He has this saying that there's no such thing as side effects, only effects.
That is true.
It's just that there are some effects that you want and some that you don't, but they're all just effects.
That's exactly true. That's exactly. You're putting a chemical into your body, and it's going to do something, good or bad, to your body. This is mind blowing. What do we do about it then? Well, it starts with you and me. I mean, we are the ones that are out there that have done our homework and done the digging and found the evidence and the truth. And we just need to educate people because it's not going to start from the top of the big pharma companies and trickle down. It's not going to start from the politicians and trickle down because they get paid off in lobbying and special interest money from the pharmaceutical companies. So it's really going to have to start from the ground up. It's going to have to start from patients and people learning how to eat different and going to their doctor and not going, hey, I want this pill because on TV I saw this thing and I think I have this problem, so can I have this pill? But going to their doctor and say, hey, I understand, my blood pressure's high, my cholesterol's high. teach me how to eat
Yeah.
and live my life so I can make this go away.
Yeah.
That's how it starts.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you look through history, every big societal change has come from the population, not from the people in power.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So
every kind of revolution, and we need a
absolutely.
plant-based revolution right now. So.
Yeah, we do. We're on the cusp, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So we're talking a little bit about big pharma, these huge, mind-blowingly big industries, and they obviously have an influence on society through the way they advertise and the drugs they push and all of that. How do you think they influence the science, though? Because there's no doubt that they do influence the science, but how does that happen?
Well, there's, all these drugs and surgeries or procedures or whatever, they all have to get approved, at least in the U.S. I don't know how Australia works, but we have a governing body called the FDA, and these drugs have to be approved by the FDA and deemed, quote, safe and
FDA,
effective.
Food and Drug Administration?
Food and Drug Administration.
Yeah.
And they have to be deemed, quote, safe and effective, whatever that means, I guess.
Yeah.
You can see what's going on.
Yeah.
But safe and effective before they're allowed on the market to be sold to the general public. So these drug companies will initially start off, and they'll usually fund their own trials and do their own trials on their own drug to see how, quote, safe and effective it is.
So that's a problem in itself, funding their own trials and doing their own
conflict of interest. Right there. So they're paying for something to go to a governing body to get approved, and they're paying for it with their own money, and if it gets approved, then they can turn around and sell it for millions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So absolutely it's a conflict of interest. So it's not to say that their trials are completely worthless, because they're not. They do tell us things.
Yeah.
But I always take it with a grain of salt, knowing that if it's funded by the drug company, they're probably going to maybe design the study so it's a little bit more favorable for the drug, or sometimes, and this has been shown by a release of public records. I mean, Dr. Michael Greger has done this. He's requested legally to have published trials released and data released from the drug companies that they literally just shove underneath the rug and they hide because it was a negative result.
Oh, okay.
So they just won't. There's a lot of unpublished data from the drug companies that just gets shoved aside.
I don't know why I haven't thought of that. I guess I just assumed that every study that gets done gets published.
No.
Wow,
In fact,
okay.
if Dr. Ben Goldacre is a doctor over in I think the UK or Europe somewhere, and if you look up his name and Google his name and look up drug studies, he goes in depth on this subject, on how the drug companies are hiding a lot of the data that's negative.
Yeah.
So they don't want their drug to look negative.
Yeah, of course.
So they just kind of hide it, and then they put out the positive results to make themselves look good.
That's actually terrifying.
It is. So that's another problem.
Yeah, that's I don't know why I haven't thought of that before or heard of that, but that is genuinely terrifying that they're keeping important information from us.
Yeah, because we should be able to know all the studies and how the whole picture looks.
Yeah.
And so there are studies out there that are not funded by the drug companies, and maybe they're funded by the government, but the research and scientific part of the government, the NIH in the U.S., or maybe they're funded by a private organization that is not a drug company, doesn't have anything to do with the drug, and those I take those a little bit more seriously because obviously there's not that conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And you can see if there's different results, or maybe it's the same results as the drug company, and maybe that is really the truth on how these drugs work.
Yeah, well, there has to be. Well, not there has to be. There are drugs that are useful and important, and there are drugs that we do need to use for various reasons. So, of course, we're not here to just say drugs are just bad, blanket ban on drugs. But we need a little bit of perspective here.
Exactly.
And maybe we don't get that. And I was already feeling negative about the pharmaceutical industry before we started talking, but now even more so.
Well, there's just to let you and your followers know, there's in the U.S. we dispense on average 13 pills, a little bit over 13 pills for every man, woman, and child in the U.S. per year.
Really?
And I don't take any prescription drugs on a regular basis. So, I mean, somebody else has got mine.
Yeah.
You know?
So, yeah, people are taking handfuls of drugs.
A lot of medications.
Wow.
A lot of medications.
What a depressing stat. So another thing I found really interesting from your talk the other day was you talked about how in science how they play with the numbers, and I can't remember the exact term. There was absolute
and relative risk reduction.
The absolute and relative risk reductions. Yeah. So can you talk us through that?
Absolutely. So this is a really, really, really important topic, and people need to understand this. And sometimes healthcare professionals don't even understand it, or they've forgot how to look through this and calculate this stuff. But it's very important. It has to do with how the statistics are reported in the medical literature, and what is reported, like in the U.S. on advertisements on TV and in the radio and in the magazine articles. So let's say, for example, that I'm Dustin. I'm going to make this drug, and I'm going to make this drug to help heart disease.
Yeah.
And so let's call it drug X. Okay, so what I need to do as my own company making this drug is I need to do trials to submit to the FDA, like we talked about, and to prove that it's safe and effective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recruit people to be in my trial and be guinea pigs, basically. And let's say I take 200 people, and I'm going to split them up into two groups, and then I'm going to give a group of 100 people drug X, the one I invented, and the other group of 100 I'm going to give just a placebo pill, a sugar pill. It doesn't do anything. And then I'm going to follow these people with heart disease for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, a year, and I'm going to see hopefully my end goal is to help people avoid death from heart disease.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing.
That should be the end goal.
That should be the end goal. Now,
and for a lot of people, like I said earlier, for a lot of people, probably a lot of the scientists involved, that is the end goal. But
I mean, if I'm a patient, I don't want to die, and I don't want to have some kind of major problem like a stroke, and then I can't talk for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That's if I'm going to take a pill, I want to make sure I'm taking the pill so that helps me avoid that.
Yeah. And no doubt there are people in the industry that's also what they want.
Correct.
It's not just an industry totally full of people that are just trying to take your money.
Right.
But there is that element though.
And I know that probably most people that work for the pharmaceutical companies on the, on their end of the deal, they probably really feel like they're helping people.
Yeah, of course they do.
So one thing that we do get kind of sidetracked is instead of, with these trials, how they set them up, instead of looking at maybe who avoids death by taking the medication, they look at, well, how many points can we lower your blood pressure? Yeah. Well, you know what I say? Who cares? Yeah. Who cares if we lower your blood pressure by 5 points and you still die of heart disease? Yeah. What I care about
that's a really
is
good point.
Not dying from heart disease. Yeah. And I think that's what the patients care about.
Yeah.
So back to our example.
Yeah, sorry.
So if I have 100 people in each group and I'm going to give them the drug, and then the other group I'm going to give placebo, and then I'm going to follow them, so say like 5 years, and then I'm going to see who dies in each group from heart disease. And let's say in the drug group, only 2 out of the 100 people die from heart disease. And in the placebo group, the sugar pill group, 4 people out of 100 die from heart disease. So I always ask this question in my presentations: did the drug work? Yeah. Yes, it did work, because less people in the drug group died from heart disease. So obviously the drug worked. Now here's how the statistics are reported. On TV, in America at least, that'll be reported as a 50% reduction in heart disease death. Yeah. Now, how did they get that 50%?
Yeah, it's obviously a weird number. Yeah.
Is 2 half of 4. Yeah. Yeah, 2 is half. That's simple algebra, simple, division and multiplication. That's easy. 2 is half of 4. Yeah. And so that's a 50% reduction in heart disease death. But was there more than 6 people in the study? Of course there was. There was 200 people in the study. So if you just forget about the other 194 people, there was really a 50% reduction in heart disease death.
If it wasn't so scary, it would be funny.
It would. So let me explain this to you in a different terms.
Yeah.
So that's called relative risk reduction.
Yeah.
That's a wildly outrageous high number that is wrongfully inflated.
Yeah.
So absolute risk reduction, this is a different term. This takes into account all 200 people in this study who either took the drug or the placebo. And that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to have 200 people in a study and everybody gets a pill, one that's a drug and one that's not, then how did everybody fare?
Yeah.
And to look at that, in our drug group, it was 2 out of 100 that died of heart disease. So that's 2% of the people, right?
Yeah.
In our placebo group, it was 4 out of 100 that died from heart disease. So that's 4%.
Yeah.
So really, if you take everybody in the study, you really only went from 4% of people dying to 2% of people dying in the study. So you really only reduced the amount of deaths overall by 2% by taking this drug.
Yeah.
See how much of a difference that is? You can you have the same study and you could go and you could tell a patient or a doctor or people on TV that this drug reduced heart disease death by 50%, or you could tell people that it reduced heart disease death by 2%.
Yeah.
And it's the same study.
And both are technically the truth.
Both are technically the truth, depending on how you...
I shouldn't say both could be argued that it's the truth.
It's the truth.
Yeah.
Depending on how you finagled the numbers.
Yeah, that's... Jesus. And for a layperson such as me, who knew none of this before I heard you talk, it's... how can you be expected to know that? If no one's told you, how can you be expected to know that this is...
Well, you're not going to know that. I mean, the people in the general public are not going to know.
Yeah,
and
so,
even
so we're being tricked, basically.
We're being tricked. I call it at best, I call it distorting the truth, but at worst, I just call it lying.
Yeah,
we're being lied to. You know, I don't think that's as appropriate to go over relative risk reduction in a TV commercial when we should be talking about absolute risk reduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go. Let's move on a bit and talk about some specific diseases then. So, we obviously a big one in Australia as well as in America is diabetes. There's a lot of people with diabetes, and there's a lot of people taking a lot of drugs for diabetes. So what should we do? Are we on the right track at all with our medication, or? When
we talk about diabetes, I like to break it up because type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease.
Yeah, good point.
And that is a disease that absolutely requires insulin for those patients, because what happens in those patients is somewhere in their youth, their body has attacked their pancreas, the beta cells in their pancreas that are responsible for producing insulin naturally in the body, and they've completely destroyed them permanently. Yeah. So those people cannot produce insulin, and you have to have insulin in your body to live and to process glucose. Yeah.
So for the purpose of this discussion, when we say diabetes, we're referring to type 2 diabetes.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So type 2 diabetes comes later in life, and that's due to what you eat. Yeah. And that's a dietary disease. It's 100% dietary disease. Yeah. And people get that because they eat rich Western diet of animal foods and processed foods and oils and all those fats. And a lot of people think that, sugar causes diabetes, because it's all about blood sugar. No, that's not the truth. So there's 3 things that go along with the cause of type 2 diabetes. And one is insulin resistance, which we're really good at talking about in the public and
most people, I reckon. Well, maybe it's just because I'm in that sort of world now, but I feel like most people would have at least heard of the term insulin resistance.
At least heard of it.
Yeah.
So just basically insulin resistant means that your body's cells don't respond to insulin like they should, so that's not able to process the carbohydrates that are broken down into simple glucose molecules. So, those glucose molecules stay high in your bloodstream, and then you have high blood sugar levels and your diabetes, type 2 diabetes. So that's one aspect that most people know, but the conversation stops there, and even in the medical education system, the conversation stops there, and it shouldn't, because the root cause of insulin resistance is these increased little particles of fat that are inside the muscle cells.
Yeah.
And those are, everybody has them. They're normal. They're called intramyocellular lipids.
Yeah.
And there's little particles of fat that are stored in your muscle cells. And the reason they're stored there is because you don't eat 24/7.
Yeah.
So in between meals and when you're fasting, you're going to need some sort of energy. So they're kind of reserves.
So if it's already at the muscle, it's easy for your body to just get it, put it in your muscle, and use it.
Right. I mean, we store fat in
yeah.
fat cells, and then we store a little bit of fat in our muscle cells.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's these little bit of fat that's in our muscle cells is normal for people like you and I that are healthy. But for people with type 2 diabetes, they have a whole excess of these intramyocellular lipids, all this extra fat in their muscle cells that's clogging up the system.
Yep.
And basically what that does to the body is it prohibits insulin from acting on the muscle cell to let the glucose from the blood into the muscle cell so that glucose can be used to make fuel.
Okay.
And so if you can't get the glucose from the blood into the muscle cell, it stays in the blood and your blood sugar rises.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And so what do the drugs do then? How do they
So the drugs will try to make the pancreas make more insulin.
Okay.
But that's not the problem. It's the fat in the muscle cells.
Yeah, yeah.
The drugs will try to maybe increase the sensitivity of the insulin attaching to the receptor on the muscle cell. Well, that'll help a little bit, but they still have all this fat clogging up the system.
Yeah.
It's not going to fix the problem.
So if you can't open the door to the cell for the glucose to get in, if you can't open the door with a key, let's go and get a sledgehammer. That's what we're trying to do.
I mean, we're trying to work a way around it, but obviously the drugs don't work very well because the people stay diabetic.
They do, yeah.
And one thing that I talked about in my talk is, one of the new classes of drugs, that just helps your kidneys filter out glucose so you can pee it out. So you have all this extra glucose in your blood, so let's just give them a drug to pee it out. Well, the problem with that is, first of all, the absolute risk reduction number on those drugs is like 1.5%.
Yeah.
That people are going to avoid some kind of complication or death from diabetes.
So pretty low.
So you get very little benefit from it. And then 2, glucose should never, ever, ever, ever be in your urine.
Yeah.
So the body's kidneys and the body is very brilliant. And we don't want to waste fuel, just like when you put fuel in your gas tank in your car. You don't want to put fuel in your gas tank and then have a leak out the side.
Yeah.
And just like we don't want to put glucose, which is fuel for our body, into our pee and just pee it out.
Yeah.
So the body's kidneys for normal, healthy people will reabsorb all that glucose back into the bloodstream that gets filtered out. And the kidneys in the initial state, in the initial part of filtering our blood. And it wants to keep that to make energy. Well, these drugs make it so our kidneys don't do that very good.
Yeah.
And so that it keeps the glucose being filtered, so we just pee it out.
So you just made me think when you said that the drugs make our kidneys stop doing that very well. So effectively we are taking a drug that makes our body work worse.
It makes our body work the opposite of how it was designed to work.
Yeah, and the drug is designed to impair our kidney function.
But we get a 1% benefit from avoiding death with diabetes. So, So then the other thing with that is drugs always come with side effects.
Yeah.
And the side effects of these drugs that make your kidneys do that and make you pee out glucose is that now you have an environment in your bladder and your ureters that's warm, wet, and has glucose, which is food. Yeah. Guess what likes warm, wet, and lots of food? Bacteria, fungi, yeast.
Okay.
So you get UTIs and urinary tract infections, fungal infections.
Yeah.
Up to 18% of people will get that.
Yeah, right. I'm learning. I'm always learning here. This is great. All right, heart disease. What about heart disease?
So heart disease is
people take all sorts of drugs for heart disease. It's our biggest killer.
Coronary heart disease, which is the plaques that end up clogging up our coronary arteries around our heart. That's a dietary disease, just like diabetes. It's a dietary disease, except for like 1 in, I think, 500 people truly have a genetic defect and can't process and get rid of excess cholesterol like their body should because they have a mutation in their DNA. But for the most part, for the other 499 out of 500 people, it's what you eat.
Yeah.
And so we eat all these rich Western foods, these meat, dairy, eggs, processed foods, oils, all this stuff that clogs up and puts fat and cholesterol into our arteries. And then they clog up and we get a heart attack, or we get chest pain, or we get some kind of crisis that happens and causes heart problems. And if you have a heart attack, it can kill part of your and cause death in part of your muscle in your heart. And then that part of the heart doesn't pump as well. And eventually, if you have these over time, especially multiple ones, your heart just gets tired and you develop congestive heart failure.
Yeah.
And you can develop arrhythmias as well. So, if we just eat correctly, if we just eat the plant-based, the low-fat, plant-based, healthy, whole fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, if we eat those foods, we don't clog up the system in the first place, and we have nice and clean arteries, and we don't have any problems.
Yeah. So I've read also about reversing heart disease. So
yes,
that same diet does the same thing.
Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Dean Ornish proved that you can take this diet with this whole foods, plant-based, nutrition, and feed that to people, and not only halt and prevent heart disease, but actually see a reversal of all these plaques in their coronary arteries. And they've seen it on coronary angiograms, where they put the dye into the patient's veins and arteries, and they look at it with in a angiogram, and they can see the vessels opening up after people eat this way, after just literally a matter of weeks or months.
Yeah, so much better than drugs, eh?
It is. It is. Because the drugs, I'll mention the drugs like statins.
Yep.
Everybody's probably heard of statins because they lower cholesterol. And you would think that would be good because less cholesterol, less clogged arteries. Well, the absolute risk reduction number on statins is anywhere from about 0.5% to 1.5%, avoiding death and avoiding future heart attacks and strokes.
Wow. Okay. I thought that was actually one of the drugs that are,
one of the better ones.
Yeah, one of the better ones. One that's effective.
It's definitely marketed like that and used like that, but you get about 0.5% to 1.5% chance of avoiding some kind of crisis or death with those. And in addition to that, you like all drugs have effects, as you called them. So you get a 2% chance of developing diabetes from taking a statin.
Yeah.
And you get a 10% chance of having some kind of muscle pain, muscle weakness, some kind of muscle damage to your body by taking statins.
So the risks are actually worse
more than the benefits. Yeah. So if you just eat well, you don't need them.
Yeah. What time do you have to go? How long have you got?
I've got probably 15, 30 minutes.
Okay, no worries. I could talk all day, but let's...
yeah, me too. Me too.
All right, let's just make sure we don't make you miss your plane.
Yeah.
All right, so cholesterol. There's a lot of people on cholesterol-lowering drugs.
Yes.
I know what happened to my cholesterol over last year when I started eating only potatoes. And my cholesterol wasn't terrible to begin with, but it wasn't good either. But what are your thoughts on cholesterol drugs and how to improve that?
Well, we talked about the statins, and then there's other drugs like Zadia, which is ezetimibe, and that's a drug that basically tells your gut not to absorb the cholesterol from the food that you eat. But then the side effects with that are GI related, so you get some nausea and upset stomach and maybe some diarrhea and those kind of problems. But if you didn't put the cholesterol there in the first place, then you wouldn't have to worry about absorbing it into your bloodstream. And I want to point this out to people. Plant foods contain no measurable amount of cholesterol.
Yeah.
Animal foods all have cholesterol. So if you're just eating healthy whole plant foods, you're not even getting any cholesterol.
Yeah.
So that's a bonus right there.
I had an email from, I won't say her name, but a very prominent low-carb person in Australia. And she was telling me that it's dangerous to have no cholesterol, as I did with my potato thing, because cholesterol's I can't remember exactly what she said, but she's talking about how important it is and how it's the building blocks of all these different parts of our body. And I think she was talking about how it's great for brain function and all of this. And yeah, she was trying to scare me, I think.
Well, first,
but anyway, so what would you say to those sorts of arguments?
I would say, first of all, you're obviously dead and in a coffin, right? Because you're standing right in front of me talking to me. And obviously
it was funny. She
that
said,
didn't work for you.
She said, oh, you can do without it for a short period of time, but in the long term, it's going to be really bad. And I was like, well, it's been a year.
Yeah.
How long do I have to go before you say this is long enough? But anyway, so.
Well, to her point and her credit, actually, cholesterol is important in the body. And it is used, to make hormones and help with body functions. It's part of, it helps to make steroid hormones, normal produced hormones in the body that we need. But the body makes all the cholesterol on its own naturally to fulfill all those human requirements on a regular basis. So you don't need to put cholesterol from food into your body. When we do that, then we turn around and we take pills that try to take cholesterol out of our bloodstream. So it's like that doesn't even make sense that we're putting it in there in the first place.
And again, you're taking something that's designed to impair your function of your body in some way.
Correct.
Which is something I never thought about until this conversation right now. I've always thought these drugs are designed to enhance the way our body functions some way, but most of the time it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like they're designed in some way to impair some sort of body function and stop your body from doing what it's supposed to do. And somehow that's supposed to make us better.
Exactly. We're putting a chemical into our body to alter the way that our body naturally functions because we have abused our body with the wrong kinds of foods. So now we're trying to make up for it and put this chemical in our body to make our body do things it doesn't normally do. Yeah. And it just doesn't really make any sense to me. It doesn't.
And if you impair on purpose the function of your body, of course it's not going to just be impaired in only one very small specific way.
That's why you have side effects. That's why you have side effects. So even if there's some magic pill that eventually comes out to treat 10 different diseases at once, someday there's always going to be side effects. Yeah. Always.
Yeah. Right. I'm struggling to take all this in now. Anyway, we could talk about lots of different diseases. So maybe I've got a list here, but I'll just cut to one that's very important for me and in my history with depression. Mm-hmm. And, we do treat depression with drugs. There's a lot of different drugs for treating depression. What are your thoughts on that?
So you're talking about the psychotropic drugs, the antidepressants, the anti-anxiety agents, those type of drugs. Those are called the psychotropic drugs, and they include like the SSRIs, Zoloft, Paxil, Prozac.
SSRIs are the serotonin reuptake inhibitors. That's the only one I've ever really heard of because I was prescribed that.
Yeah, and then there's there's other drugs like the benzodiazepines are anti-anxiety, and there's other antidepressants that work on norepinephrine and dopamine in the system, Wellbutrin, and there's stuff like Buspar, which is an anti-anxiety agent. There's Effexor, which is an antidepressant. And so there's all these different drugs that we use to target different chemicals in our brain. And honestly, I think it's the most dangerous class of medications on the market.
Okay.
Because this is actually specifically what Dr. Ben Goldacre talks about, how the drug companies had made these drugs and they've hidden a lot of the studies because they keep them unpublished. In a lot of these studies, that's been shown that there is no benefit to taking these drugs, to getting started on them for most people that have some kind of depression or anxiety disorder. And if you were to just go and you look at studies that compare drugs to cognitive behavior therapy, which is a form of counseling from a psychologist or something, or a mental health counselor, that they fare equally just as well as each other. Now, I've never heard of somebody getting permanent tics, which can happen on psychotropic drugs,
Yeah.
or having suicidal thoughts, which can be caused by psychotropic drugs.
Yeah.
When they go to their counselor and they have a session and they come out.
Yeah.
Like those kind of side effects just don't happen. It's always positive things,
Yeah.
you know? So while maybe they're shown in studies, at least the published ones, because there's a lot of unpublished ones, that they're equal in efficacy to the just regular counseling, you have all the side effects to deal with too. And then these drugs actually, when you get on them and you're on them for an extended period of time, even though they're not supposed to be addictive, they cause dependency.
Yeah.
Even though they're not like a hardcore morphine or something that you would think typically would cause addiction and dependency, and that when you go off of that, you're going to have all these withdrawal symptoms. People get withdrawal symptoms on these psychotropic medication. When they try to go off their antidepressants, they just go off them cold turkey, they're going to go crazy. They're going to be anxious and stressed and irritable and depressed, and they're going to have suicidal thoughts, and all these things can happen. And it's a withdrawal period, and it's very devastating to patients who go through this. So it's not something that if you're on these, you don't stop them without working with your doctor and trying to, I would say, get some counseling. There's also some other things that can help people. There's like electroconvulsive therapy that helps mostly just short term, where you're kind of inducing mini little seizures on the body. But then, it's certainly not as safe as counseling. Just going to a psychologist and getting counseling. But
are there any kind of antidepressant drugs that there must be situations where you probably should be on?
So I've seen situations a couple times in my career where maybe you have a schizophrenic. I've seen a schizophrenic that excuse me, has been put on these psychotropic drugs, antipsychotics and antidepressants. And when they're on these medications, they can function and they can, hold down a job and be social and interact appropriately in public and with their family and friends, and life is somewhat normal for them. And that's a good thing. And there's going to be people that are going to be so far gone as far as needing that help that they maybe this is the last thing that would work for them. I would always encourage people to get just the counseling. Go exercise, go eat well. And if you do, go find a support group, or be involved in a church and develop a loving support group around you, or some other. If you have if you're into basketball or baseball or softball, and you get on a team and you have that camaraderie, and then you do the counseling and the exercise and you eat well, a lot of times that'll just fix everything. For most people. But there are some people, or some, like with bipolar, severe bipolar disease, I've seen patients that they literally can't function unless, they could do all those things, but they still have problems. And maybe the last line resort, they do need to try out the medication. So I'm not saying never use them, but it should always be last line therapy.
Okay, that's a good point. And it's good to know that you're not like on this 100% crusade against all sort of pharmaceuticals. It seems like a very balanced view that you have to me, that drugs have their place, but let's not make them the first port of call.
It should be third, fourth, fifth down the line instead of first.
I've a lot of people naturally have. I don't wonder if you've heard of this book called Potatoes Not Prozac.
No, I haven't heard of that.
You haven't? Okay. So a lot of people have sent me links to that book since, for obvious reasons.
Have you read it?
No, I've got it, but I haven't. I'm so busy. I just haven't had a chance to read it. But I was hoping you would have read it so that you could tell me about it.
No, I've never heard of it, but it actually sounds fascinating. I'd really be interested in what that has to say. I'll have to look at it and pick up a copy myself. Yeah,
I can't remember the author's name at the moment, but I've read the blurb, and it's you probably don't need to read the blurb to know what it's about.
Well, I tell you what, I'm pretty sure that there's probably a lot less side effects and problems with potatoes than there is with taking Prozac.
There are a lot of side effects actually, but they're all good ones.
Yes, good bowel movements and good moods and
So anyway, we can we can change a lot about the way our brain works by changing the way we eat, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We change the way we eat, we move our body. At this conference, one thing that really stuck out to me is that a couple of the different speakers spoke so highly and recommended so highly how important love and support is in relationships. And that's almost like on the blue zones on Dan Buettner's pyramid. That was the foundation of his pyramid, was loving and supporting relationships with other human beings. Yeah. And then it was the food. Yeah. And then it was moving your body and so forth. And so
that was a common theme too. I came here thinking that this was going to be just all about nutrition and what to eat and all that sort of thing. But there was a lot about nutrition, but there was also this big emphasis, like you said, on just general lifestyle change. So how you move, how you relate to others, your spirituality, all this sort of.
And I've taken that more seriously in the past, probably 3/4 of a year. Yeah. Because for many years, I've just been on this, I'm going to work. And, in May, after I got done with my board certification exams and passed those, I was like, I'm working myself to death. Yeah. And I need to take some time to actually enjoy life, connect with my family, connect with my friends, develop some kind of a community and social relationships with people and have that love and support. Yeah. And it just makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. Everyone knows that it's good to love and be loved.
Yeah, that's the meaning of life, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is to love.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's wrap this up. Let's finish with let's talk a little bit about having talked about your thoughts on drugs and that. Let's talk a little bit about what you personally do. How do you eat? How do you move? How do you live your life to keep healthy? And
so, nutrition is a focal point of my own personal life. And I stick to the fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, which is beans, peas, and lentils, and then nuts and seeds. Yeah. And
so let's go through a day then. What would you have for breakfast on a typical day?
So like today for breakfast, I had oatmeal with some golden raisins in them and some cinnamon on top. And then I had fresh cut fruit. So watermelon, honeydew, pineapple, and cantaloupe. And it was delicious. And so
sounds like a pretty good breakfast to me.
Yeah. Like for supper last night was a perfect example when we went out to eat. We went to a Mexican restaurant called Su Casa here in Santa Rosa, and I love the fact that they have a McDougall section on their recipe. Yeah, it's great.
That's great. And I think all menus should have that.
They
At
should.
least have that, but maybe just be that in total. But anyway.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great because I felt safe, like it's hard to feel safe when you go out to eat. So I ordered a burrito, like a bean burrito. Yeah. And it had broccoli in it, and I think beans and rice and stuff like that. And it was fantastic. Over this enchilada sauce, no oil. So I love Mexican food. Yep. I like to make. Honestly, I don't think I could live. I probably wouldn't be able to survive without brown rice. Yeah. I know your thing is potatoes and mine is brown rice. I have brown rice all the time. Yeah. Okay. So brown rice with vegetables on top, and then tomatoes and seasonings and salsa to season things up with. So I have that a lot for dinner. Yeah.
What would you take to work? What would you...
So what I do is I batch cook because I work 7 days on, 7 days off. And I do like my 80 hours in 1 week, so I don't have time to cook and stuff. So I'll make big pots of food on my week off. Like, I made Mary McDougall's Tex-Mex couscous salad the other day. Yeah. And it was couscous and bell peppers, red and green bell peppers and onions, and there was black and pinto beans in it, and green onions, and all kinds of cilantro and all kinds of good stuff. And then I'll just put it in Tupperware dishes, freeze it. Yeah. And when I go to work, I just grab a container, go, and
so easy.
I can do it like that.
Yeah, and it's not that hard if you're making one meal for dinner. It's not that hard to
make a big pot.
Just make 10 meals instead of just one.
Yeah, you just eat a little bit and and put the rest in. Yeah, I like burgers too, like bean burgers. Yeah. So Jeff Novick has some great bean burger recipes. So you make a whole batch of those up, and then you can freeze some in the freezer, and then just take them out and and cook them when you need
Sounds
them.
good. I love a burger too, but I haven't actually got around to trying to make my own whole food plant-based burgers, but that's something to try.
They're
sure.
really simple. You make them in like 15 minutes or less.
Oh, really? That's
Yep.
all. Okay.
So you have to,
I'll
like
give it a
Jeff
try.
Novick's fast food burgers and fries. He has a DVD and it shows you exactly how to do it.
All right.
Simple and quick
We'll
and
have
easy.
to look that up. I'll do some show notes and try to go through this and try to put links on our website to all the interesting stuff we've talked about. So
Absolutely.
yeah, if people want to find that, then go to the website and look up the episode page, and hopefully it'll all be there if I'm good at my job.
Oh, you are.
All right.
You
So
are.
last question. What now for the future? Do you have some goals or plans of where you want to take this plant-based physician thing?
Well,
Or even any personal goals? Whatever.
I want to. I just want to continuing on. My book was published about it was about two years ago. It was September of 2014. It's called The Empty Medicine Cabinet.
Yeah.
The Pharmacist's Guide to the Hidden Dangers of Drugs and the Healing Powers of Food.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that.
Absolutely. So I want to continue to help people with my book, to get out there and speak like at conferences like McDougall and then locally back in Florida, and do podcast shows like this. I'm a monthly guest usually on the Dr. Don radio show. He's out of Bullhead City, Arizona.
That's a normal radio show.
It's a normal radio show, and he's actually on both AM and FM stations, and he's out to the public, and he talks about this whole message. So I try to do radio show appearances, podcast show appearances, get out there and speak. And the more that we can get out there and help people, the better off. And then I try to keep my website up to date with writing articles on different disease states and how the food versus the medicine works. And people can find that at plantbasedpharmacist.com. Yep. And I just want to keep it rolling. And I see myself doing this. I see myself doing this for 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Yeah, great. Yeah, just do what you can to talk to anyone who will listen, basically. And
Absolutely.
Try and get this
Connect
message
with wonderful leaders like you in this field, and it's just great.
Yeah, well, good luck to you. I love what you're doing. As I don't know if I've said on this podcast yet, but as I've said many times, it's so nice to see someone in pharmacy who is basically against pharmacy, you know. It's an unusual thing, and it's this podcast for me is all about talking to people who are outside the square thinkers, and people who do cool things. Basically, my whole at the core of my whole Spud Fit challenge was me trying to improve myself as a person, and I did that by doing something that's unusual and outside the square. And I love having the opportunity to talk to other people who have also done things that are unusual and outside the square and improved themselves as a result. And hopefully some of what the people that I talk to have learned and done can rub off on me and help me to keep improving. And you certainly fit the bill. It's been a privilege and an honor to sit with you and talk and hang out over the last couple of days. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. It's been such a pleasure, and it's such an honor and privilege to be on the podcast with you.
All right. Let's get you on the plane then.
All right. Sounds good.
Spud up. All right. How great was that? Isn't he lovely? Isn't he great? I think I'm Dustin Rudolph's #1 fan now. Thanks again, Dustin, for being on the show, and thanks to everyone for listening. I hope you learned a lot as I did. I hope you maybe changed your way of thinking about certain drugs and certain diseases and ways that you can treat certain things. I hope you have enjoyed it and maybe come up with a plan to tackle your health issues differently in the future. Again, if you're interested in finding out more about Dustin, you can look him up on he is the Plant-Based Pharmacist. So you can look him up online as the Plant-Based Pharmacist, and you can search for Dustin Rudolph, The Empty Medicine Cabinet. That's his book. The Empty Medicine Cabinet, the Pharmacist's Guide to the Hidden Danger of Drugs and the Healing Powers of Foods. Again, all the links to find Dustin and his online website, social media stuff, I'll put it in the show notes on my website, www.spudfit.com. And that's that. Enjoy. Again, if you like what I'm doing, please share it with your friends. Go to iTunes and hit subscribe and leave me a 5-star review. And check out my book too, the DIY Spud Fit Challenge, a how-to guide to doing your own Spud Fit Challenge. All right, next week, it's an exciting one for me. We have Alan Goldhammer on the podcast next week. So tune in next week and continue to have your mind expanded. All right, enjoy your week, everyone. Thanks for listening. Spud up.